Welcome back, everyone. Escalators are off. Here we are. We're ready. Is the sound okay, Zoom folks, now that that's quieter in here? Let me know if not. Okay, great. So we've got 22 people on Zoom. We've got, for those of you tuning in, we have it's standing room only in here. We've got a great crowd tonight. I'm really thrilled to introduce our poetic opener for the evening, Eric Hansen. So Eric is Danish and Cree, and he is the youngest of 4 children born on the prairies. Since 2015, he has called Victoria his home. In 2022, his poetry was released as lyrics on the album Trip Doctor by Sheepskin Sound Reductions. The music is distributed by CD Baby, available from Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. For 2023, he is thrilled to have been accepted into the ARC Magazine Poet in Residence Mentorship Program, where he will be mentored by former poet laureate Yvonne Blomer. This year, for the first time, his poetry has been accepted to appear in periodicals online in Canada and abroad as he continues towards publishing goals with a body of work curated for his first book. Please welcome Eric Hansen.
Thank you, Zoe. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Hello, Zoom land. You're also tiny in Zoom. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm already having a lot of fun. When I first came to Planet Earth Poetry, I felt like I found my people. Right? Poetry Sunday afternoons instead of watching, I don't know what. This first piece is something I wrote soon after I came here. It's an ode to all the poets in the room. Of sorts, an ode. It's titled Poets Take the Time. Oh, I'm going to start my timer. Poets take the time to stop and write the roses. He went into the woods. Wood turned to chairs and was pressed into service as books. And this is how he found his people. Poets stewing motley paused in all the meanings. This variegated tribe is dressed in hearts and sorrows, hats of feathered hope, wielding pens like arrows. On their backs they sported quivers full of words to launch from stands of bows into the hearts of dear to them, from where they draw each and every bleeding word. Some lips were contemplated closed, others flowed self-exposure, seeking closure, love they've made and loved ones lost. You may catch their fancy, or they may snare you in their prose and shower you in eloquence, but if you break their hearts, they will drown you in the ink. This next one is saddest thing I've ever wrote, and it's on the theme of heroes, big brothers as heroes. It's an elegy for my brother Clarence, who died of an opioid overdose during the pandemic. It's titled Here Lies True Tales, an elegy for Clarence Hansen. Police found the body in Aladdin Motel, but that's far from the story for a lifetime to tell. You quickly profile him by the state that he's in, but you can't measure a man by the sum of his sin. As a boy, he ran restless, but came home to his mother. Here lies some true tales of a man who's my brother. He winked at the rules and broke hearts in between. He starved all my debts, but he fed all my dreams. Well, the state judges people for the state that they're in, but you can't sentence a man for the sum of his sin. He walked a hard path till he came to rest. Oh, brother, I miss you. I forgive all the debts. Well, doctor tells why it's the state that we're in, but you can't medicate me to cure all my sin. Oh, brother, rest easy. I'll follow my dreams. Your stories will hold from childhood scenes. Oh, brother, please tell me free spirits can roam, unleashed from tar shadows to truly find home. As a boy, he ran restless, but came home to my mother. And it's a true story. I love you, my brother. On a more cheery note around heroes, one of my heroes is here in the room, and she might be incognito. This poem is under a slightly different name. She plays guitar, and she saved the world. Kiki saved the world with chord of G. She strolled country roads on summer days, city streets and alleyways, boulevards and avenues. She's likely walked on your street too. Prepare for the story of the minstrel Kiki. It's because of her that we live freely. Her guitar strumming saved our world. All she played was chord of G. When days were dark, vagrants frowned, empty bottles strewn on ground, she simply strummed one chord of G. They all found ecstasy. She had perfected one hero's note. From rain clouds, the sunshine broke. People came from around the world, heard one note strummed, they chanted loud, Kiki, play us chord of G. We don't need no melody. All we need is one more G. Her chord of G lulled babies' sleep, quelled family feuds where hate ran deep. Love thy neighbor, a mystery, a Kiki strum men's family. That guitar bridge joined generations, silenced guns of warring nations, avoid the heat of war decreed. Kiki rocks, peace, harmony. Those guitar vibes traveled into space. Kiki called down an alien race. Space folk landed. They could not speak, huge round eyes and pointed beak. Big men scared, wouldn't come around, but Kiki went and stood her ground. Humankind need not flee when Kiki plays one chord of G. Now the world is a better place. Humans live in loving grace. No more hunger or misery, all because she played that G. I have a new poem. Can't resist reading a new poem. It's an old poem that got renovated. It's a duplex, and I have a special shout out to Arc Magazine accepting me into the mentor program and Yvonne Blomer for her mentorship on the renovations of this poem into a duplex. Its title is Burn This Poem. Love. She dares us to practice alchemy, dropping matches in darkest corners, darkest memories dropped in corners, dust flares at the disturbance, remains of feral beasts flaring, bones burned clean of putrid flesh, bone burned clean, a gleaming souvenir from smoke. With clean breath, lungs forget, air fills ribs, clearing eyes see further. Illicit love to cinch her ribs into a corset, she comes forth in all her finest gowns, finest silks come cut and formed with colors much admired in the street. The street sees color rising in her cheeks, and illicit lace chafes her thighs from underneath. Illicit memory peers from underneath her stride, pursuit of yet another honeyed flesh. How honeyed flesh has kindled flames to warm against the vagaries of tempest, the vagaries of a tempestuous affair. Her wardrobe catches fire. Leaning into fire, her breath catches. Let fine breath feed flames, let fine silk feed flames, baubles tossed in fire to melt. Tossing in sleep, we melt into each other. If by chance love burns, let us know the way. Sweet salves on burns from ways of knowing, mollify our folly with soft ears. Let baubles melt and soften until fire cools, then harden them to coal for 1,000,000 years. In 1,000,000 years, our temper will be diamond. Let us practice alchemy. So, with my remaining time, I was speaking with Michael earlier. He says he's going to Costa Rica, and we were in Costa Rica in the last year, just when we were allowed to go anywhere. And my souvenir was a poem that I wrote while I was there. So this one's from Michael on his trip. It works out. Wanton hibiscus, hummingbird, promiscuous, jungle love story. So a lot of poems wanted to come tonight and they couldn't. And that was hard because I love all my poems. There's a poem that I wrote that some of you may relate to. If you've ever been composing in your mind, sitting somewhere, looking like maybe you're doing nothing, while there might be something to do. And people wonder. Or if you've ever been in a park walking in circles, and people wonder if you're lost. And I told this poem it couldn't come, we don't have time, But this poem has a t-shirt. And so it sent the t-shirt. It's in handy out in public when you're wandering, muttering to yourself. Thank you, everyone. I really had a lot of fun.
I want that.
Thank you so much, Eric. And for anyone who in the audience or Zoom audience is non-sighted, the t-shirt says on the front, it's a black t-shirt with white writing. It says, "I am not lazy, I am a poet." And on the back, it says, "I'm not lost, I am a poet." Okay, so thank you. That was great, Eric. One more hand for Eric. All right, Michael, it's your turn. So Michael Crummey is the author of 12 books of fiction and poetry. His most recent novel, The Innocents, was a finalist for the Giller Prize, the Governor General's Award, and the Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize. His latest poetry collection, Passengers, appeared in 2022. He lives in St. John's. So I always like to hunt up an interview with the poet and learn a bit more about them. And I really loved this quote from an interview with Poetry and Voice that you did, Michael. When asked about the job of the poet, he said, "Talking about a poet's job implies there is money involved in the process." And there isn't. To me, it's always felt like a vocation, something I can't help doing, regardless of the fact that there are very few obvious rewards. But what that vocation consists of, other than trying to put something of the strange, awful, beautiful, sorrowful, magnificent contradictions of being alive on paper, is a bit of a mystery to me. So I love that. And please welcome Michael Crummey.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you, everybody, for coming. What a fabulous group of people you are. I just did a little event at a high school at lunchtime. You guys are amazing. And thank you to all of the fabulous poets who've been up here. And thank you, Eric, for that amazing presentation. I love the shirt. I would not be able to wear it in good conscience because I am lazy. And most of the time I am lost. It's so great to be out again. And to be at an event like this. It kind of has gotten lost in the world to a certain extent, and I'm really out of practice. I forgot to bring a pen, so I'd like to thank the lovely lady in red for letting me use her special pen. I forgot my phone, so Zoe, if you could keep time for me, that would be great. It's always great to be on the West Coast, especially at this time of year. I do have one issue with it. I was invited to get a cup of tea before we started, and I went over and rooted through the basket, and there's no Tetley. What is in that basket is not tea, I'm sorry. I moved to Ontario when I was about 21, and I went out with some friends to the Chinese Laundry Cafe, and they came to take our order, and I said, "I'd like tea, please." And she said, "What kind?" And I looked at her like she had 3 heads. I had never heard of other kinds of tea. It was a total revelation. So, but everything else has been great. So thank you for the invitation. It's really, really lovely to be here. I know she just quoted me saying there's no money in poetry, but I felt a bit like a drug dealer over there at the table, stuffing 20s in my pants. So thank you for being so enthusiastic. I am going to read. And I'm going to read from the new book, Passengers, which is a bit of a weird book. The first section of the book is are you guys familiar with the Swedish poet Thomas Tranströmer?
Yes.
Won the Nobel Prize in 2011. I started reading him quite intensely around that time. And there was something about the way that he wrote, and particularly something about the way that he wrote about the physical world of northern Sweden, and something about the way that he used the physical world as a way into the psyche that I just could not get enough of. And I almost immediately started thinking, I wish he had written about Newfoundland. I wish he had come to Newfoundland and written about this place. I knew he wasn't going to do that. So I thought what I would do is I started writing Tranströmer poems as if he had come and visited. And at first it was just a couple that I tried out. And eventually I had a dozen. And then I thought, I'm just going to have him do a circumnavigation of Newfoundland, stopping at different places, and have him write about the places he goes. It felt like a really personal project. It was a way of seeing a familiar place through a different lens. I never intended to publish it until Sarah McLaughlin at Anansi reached out. She heard something about it, asked if I would be interested in giving it to her. So I did, and this is the book. And so I had to give a little introduction to try and explain what the hell I was doing. So this is the introduction. Thomas Tranströmer was a Swedish poet, psychologist, and translator, winner of the 2011 Nobel Prize in Literature. His work explores the wonder and mystery of human consciousness, often using the stark landscape and weather of northern Sweden as a mirror or a foil for his obsessions. What follows are loose, amateur translations of pieces I imagine Tranströmer might have written had he recently visited the island of Newfoundland and the coast of Labrador. I've tried to remain true to the spirit and tone and to some of the most obvious strategies of Tranströmer's poetry, but it goes without saying that these pieces would in every way be superior in the original Swedish. I don't know how many of you have been to St. John's. Those of you who have been there, I don't know how many of you have been to George Street. George Street is a bar, a street of bars. There's nothing on the street but bars. It's about 2 or 3 blocks long. I raised 2 daughters, so I fucking hate George Street. Hate the place. So this is Tranströmer on George Street. Someone has called 911 and the crowd is waiting for police to arrive, for ambulance sirens to screw the night's lid that much tighter. No one knows the specifics of tonight's emergency. It paces the street in a dark cloak and a plague mask, handing out drink tickets. Underage girls waver by in cirrus cloud skirts, in stilettos that were drunk before they got here. A terrible mistake pads beside them like a dog on a leash. They can feel the wet nudge of its snout against their thighs. Tomorrow night, the same generic emergency, the same dull constellations dancing close to the floor, looking naked and lush as freshly peeled fruit. It's easy for the young to be happy, believing their lives are about to begin in earnest. Watch them stab drunkenly with their keys, trying to find the ignition in the dark. So one of the things that I was able to do as the translator of these pieces was I was able to include a fairly extensive section of translator's notes. I will read a couple of them just to help explain a little of what the poem about. There's a place in Newfoundland, a little place called Dover, and it has running through it what's called the Dover Fault. The Dover Fault is a regional geological structure that forms the boundary between rocks once part of North Africa and or Europe, and the rocks that form the Appalachian Mountains after the continental collision some 410 million years ago. This is Transtromer on the Dover Fault. 1. 2 continents collided along this line. They exchanged insurance information while waiting for the police. Adjusters arrived to assess the damage. Lawyers floated around them like a boom trying to contain an oil spill. On the advice of counsel, neither party admits fault. Thank you. Thank you. 2. 2 continents collided along this line. One was recently widowed. The other had been arguing all night with her husband. It was late. The festivities got out of hand. Someone turned the lights down low. Someone slipped hallucinogenics into the punch bowl. Bitterness and blind grief on the dance floor. They didn't see each other coming. 3. 2 continents collided along this line. Their curfew came and went as they lay there making out in the long grass. They can still hear voices calling their names from other time zones. Eventually, they will have to come up for air. So most of these poems are, of course, not related to any specific Transtromer poem. It's just me trying to muck around in some way remotely similar to how he went about his business. But there are a handful in here that are direct responses to poems of his. So I wanted to do one of those. And I wanted to start by reading his and then mine in response. So this is a piece called Black Postcards. And it's in 2 sections. 1, the calendar is full, future unknown. The cable hums the folk song from no country. Falling snow on the lead still sea. Shadows wrestle on the dock. 2, in the middle of life it happens that death comes and takes your measurements. This visit is forgotten and life goes on, but the suit is sewn in silence. I know, what am I thinking? I gotta follow that now. All right, this is Black Postcards. 1. Wind is the deeper ocean here. We lie at the bottom of that wild sea, weighting the bed to the floor. Trees heave their dark crowns against the windows of our sunken vessel, wanting in. 2. In the middle of life, it happens that death comes for something you can't live without. The heart clacks along on its narrow rails, but beneath your clothes, raw stitches mark your grave, like the X on a map. And I'll do one more from these. And this one, I wasn't sure I was going to do this one, but after Anne's Moose poem, I had no choice. If I can find it, that is. A couple of years ago, I was on the west coast of Newfoundland, and we went to do a hike on the Blow-Me-Down Brook Trail. And just as we parked and got out of our cars, there were 2 moose heads set on the ground right at the head of the trail. And as we investigated a little further, we found all of the legs thrown into the alders. So these had obviously been poached. And it seemed like a situation that Transtromer would be interested in writing about. So this is Transtromer on the Blow-Me-Down Brook Trail. At the trailhead, the remains of 2 poached moose. Their long faces placed side by side like plush slippers at the foot of a stair. The limbs discarded in ditch alder. You count several times over before confirming all 8 among the camouflage. The dead world is infinite, or nearly so. It crowds our wake as we travel, as we climb the steps to our beds, though by and large it trails us in anonymous silence. A cow and her yearling, their eyes half closed as if dozing beside a brook while the irresistible mystery rattles past. In their dreams, they are impossibly light on their black hooves. They are practically weightless. How are we doing for time?
So you can read it for 11 minutes.
Oh, is that all? All right, okay.
Or 1 hour.
So the last section of the book is actually was inspired by a Polish poet, Zbigniew Herbert, his name is. And I traveled in Poland a number of years ago, and the person who brought me over there gifted me his collected poems. And in there was a poem called Native Devil. And it was a poem about the arrival of Lucifer in Poland during the Middle Ages. And the way it was written immediately made me think there was a way to write the same sort of poem for Newfoundland. So the first poem in this section has Lucifer arriving as a stowaway on a wooden ship in the Middle Ages. And then it follows Lucifer more or less through his adventures in Newfoundland, right up to the present. And in some ways, I think I was wanting to explore how Lucifer would find himself right at home in Newfoundland. But in other ways, I really thought that, like all of us who live there, he would certainly develop the same love-hate relationship with the place that we have. So I wanted to do a few of these for you, and I'll start with, and why not, Lucifer on George Street. The cobbled pavement hobbles his cloven feet. He lurches drunkenly as he navigates the drunken crowds, the bleary racket. He wears a leather coat to his ankles, his sulfur stink muted by the cold drizzle. 2 city blocks of bars, but for all its rowdy dissipation, the street disappoints him. Most of the shamelessness on display is carnival stupidity, infantile gratification. His mirrored horns are dismissed as costume. A girl in a miniskirt drapes her still warm underwear from one bony thorn. Shit-faced boys crowd him for selfies, flashing their barnyard tongues at the screen. These are his children, by all accounts. The thought makes him want to eat something raw. He has always felt more at home in a church. So part of what this section allowed me to do was to spend some time exploring some of the devil lore that exists in Newfoundland folklore. And there are all kinds of stories in Newfoundland about the devil showing up either to a dance or else showing up at a house on a stormy night during a card game and being invited in and sitting in. And slowly over the evening, as he never loses, of course, it becomes clear to the people he's playing with who exactly is sitting at their table. So this is Lucifer at cards. In the days before electricity, he'd ferret out a game of chance in some salt box stilted near the ocean. Fishermen playing crib or 120s in a kitchen lit by kerosene. He was a stranger at the door in poor weather. They dealt him in, offered tea and cigarettes, asking after his queer complexion, if his people were from up along. They didn't have money enough to gamble, wagering their hands with matchsticks. Honor was the only thing at stake. Hours in the stifling heat of a wood stove, among the endlessly shuffled cards, the mild Shakespearean cursing. He wouldn't remove his hat, and they let it be, though he knew it bothered them. He never lost, and they were too hospitable to ask him to leave, even after they divined who was sitting at their table. He admired that. their conviction that manners trumped all other considerations. It's mostly internet poker now, or Texas Hold'em with a minimum buy-in, a horseshoe of sullen hipsters under fluorescence. Paying to fuck is how he thinks of it. He misses the intimacy of those close kitchens, the almost courtly politeness, the milky sugared tea. There's a place in Conception Bay called Job's Cove. I don't know how many of you have been there. Job's Cove used to be called Devil's Cove. And it was because the harbor is at the bottom of an incredibly steep hill. And it was a devil of a time getting up that hill. And everybody was perfectly happy with the name of the town until some clergyman decided that that was an inappropriate name for a town and insisted that the name of the town be changed. And what they settled on was Job's Cove because of Job's troubles, and that climbing that hill was one of Job's troubles, I guess. I don't know. It seemed like a stupid idea to me, but anyway. This is Job's Cove, Conception Bay. His namesake, once upon a time, Devil's Cove, a reference to the job it was climbing off the beach, dragging their fish and gear and jelly legs up that hellish incline. He was almost touched by it, as if they had marked their doorways with lamb's blood to request he pass over, leave their dwellings be, until some dough-headed clergyman began preaching against the demonic moniker, insisting the town publish letters in the St. John's papers to announce a rechristening, to clarify their spiritual allegiances. Job's Cove is what they settled on. Poor, righteous, blameless Job. It was impossible not to hate the man, seeing him happy after all the apocalyptic suffering, accepting the latest crop of wives and children as fair compensation for his lost wives and children, giving thanks for the newly fecund cattle, for the innocent goats in the field. And I'll just do one more.
One more.
And I would like to thank you all again for being here. It's lovely to be among fellow travelers. And this is a piece called Savior's Letter. And this is something I found in the Dictionary of Newfoundland English. So a Savior's Letter was a letter usually printed purporting to be by Christ, kept as a moral guide and as a charm. He used to peddle the letter door to door, just for badness, reading it aloud to the illiterate in their mean kitchens, preaching its virtues to steal the bit of cash money they'd squirreled away in a jar, in a sock under a floorboard. Written by Christ himself, he told them, safe delivery in childbed to the bearer, freedom from bodily hurt, a spell against fire and barbarous weather, and the Dark One himself. It was like an angel kept tame in a drawer to protect the house and all within. Some gave every cent they had to purchase a second copy for the fishing boat. Easy marks, the crowd of them. Born naked and knowing how quickly they might be stripped bare again. It gave him a little quiver of pleasure to see them trace the mysterious letters with a finger, as if they could hear the Lord speaking through their skin. He'd written the thing himself during one of the old European plagues, waking to a vicious hangover and wanting to share the misery. He might still be selling them if he hadn't tired of the locals' credulousness, of making them feel less alone in the world, however briefly. Thank you so much for having me.